I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who've heard of the original Star Fox on the SNES, but probably not so many that know about the second one. And I honestly can't blame them because I also didn't know about it until recently. That's because Star Fox 2 never actually even released. It was canceled after being fully completed back in 1995 because there were fears that the game would look much worse graphically when compared to games on newer 32-bit consoles that were coming out around that time, like the Sony PlayStation or the Sega Saturn. However, during the development of the SNES Classic console, the producer proposed including Star Fox 2 because it seemed like a waste to let a completed game just waste away never being played by anyone. It was of course eventually chosen to be on the list of games for the SNES Classic that released on September 29, 2017, and was subsequently released on December 12, 2019 on the Nintendo Switch Online service, which is where I encountered it. It's just super crazy to think that an SNES game came out in 2017, but that's the reality of Star Fox 2. Star Fox 2 was developed jointly by Nintendo and a UK game studio known as Argonaut Software. Argonaut Software is known for their work on the original Star Fox for the SNES, among other games like the 3D platformer Croc and its sequels. Unfortunately, Argonaut Software no longer exists, being dissolved in early 2007. But enough about the developers, let's move on to the game. The story of Star Fox 2 is pretty much your standard Star Fox story. The evil Andross has returned and is once again sending his forces to the Lylat system in order to strike down his longtime enemies that inhabit the planet Corneria. It's up to Fox McCloud and his team of ace pilots to take back the Lylat system from Andross's grip and protect Corneria from imminent destruction. Pretty straightforward Star Fox story, right? But it's when we get to the gameplay that we start to see where the developers strayed from the original game's blueprints. Star Fox 2, unlike the original Star Fox, does not follow a linear path on which you complete missions while working your way towards Andross's base at the end. It instead allows you to go to any planet in any order you choose, the goal being to clear all of Andross's forces from the Lylat system. Another big difference to the original game is the fact that you are constantly defending Planet Corneria from attack by things like missiles, fighters, and planetary destruction cannons. If the planet's damage reaches 100%, it's game over and you have to restart back from the very beginning of the game. However, this is not really much of an issue because Star Fox 2, much like the original game, is extremely short, taking only around an hour to complete. Also, as far as I could tell, each playthrough will be very different to the last, because the planets that Andross attacks and the enemies he sends to combat you are, for the most part, completely randomized. This makes attempting multiple runs much more fun in my opinion, because you never know what will be thrown at you when you start up a new game. There are also 3 difficulty settings that will affect what enemies you face and how many of them will be sent after you. The normal difficulty is almost impossible to fail in my opinion, as the enemies have much less health and there are really not that many that you're going to have to deal with. Hard and Expert, on the other hand, will actually present some challenge to those that were not satisfied with normal. However, Expert can only be unlocked by clearing hard mode with a B ranking, no damage to Corneria, and no lost wingman, which can actually be rather tough to pull off when you're just starting out with Star Fox 2. This is probably a good time to mention another major difference to the original game, in that you do not have to play as Fox McCloud. You have the choice of any 2 pilots from the Star Fox team, including 2 new members that I've never seen until Star Fox 2, Mew the Lynx and Faye the Dog. Fox and Falco are all-arounders, Slippy and Peppy are focused more on shields, and Mew and Faye are more speed-central characters. There are also 3 special abilities you can have depending on the character you choose. Fox and Falco have a powerful bomb, Slippy and Peppy can regenerate shields, and Mew and Faye have a deflector shield. When choosing a team, it's obviously up to personal taste, but I found that it's a good idea to take 2 different roles so you can switch depending on the situation. I personally always use Slippy and Falco because I think they give you a good balance of health and damage. They're also my favorite characters from the series, so it worked out well for me. However, you can only switch to your wingman on the overworld map, so you need to think ahead to what you're going to be doing before going into battle. If you're not familiar with the Star Fox series, it is of course a multi-directional shooter in which the player controls a ship and has to use its main weapons, the blasters, to take out a variety of enemies. As for the main controls, the D-pad or left analog stick on the Switch is used to move your ship around in a 3D space. Up looks down looks up, left looks left, and right looks right. The blaster is mapped to B, boost to Y, and the special abilities to X. L and R are used to turn more dramatically, and can be double tapped to perform a barrel roll that deflects all incoming damage if timed properly. This is honestly probably the most important mechanic in the game, so I definitely recommend practicing it if you're going to be taking on the higher difficulties. There's also a power-up that when picked up will give you 2 blaster shots instead of 1. It's really powerful and I definitely recommend picking it up if you see one. If you find a second one, which I never managed to do, your blaster apparently gets upgraded even further to the powerful Type B cannons. If the player is in a level where there is ground, like inside a large ship or on a planet, you can hit the select button to transform your ship into a walking mode that has its own unique set of controls as well. As you might have already guessed, it is rather hard to move and look around in a 3D space using just an SNES controller because there is only one set of directional buttons. In this case, the developers quote-unquote solved this problem by letting you move with the D-pad and look left and right with the L and R buttons. It works, but that's really all I can say about it. It's really annoying when you're in the middle of a heated battle and you have to slowly adjust your aim with the shoulder buttons. It's just not intuitive at all in my opinion. I much prefer the way that the space battles work. The only other difference between the 2 modes is that in Walker mode, Y is no longer boost, but instead performs a small jump. I think we've covered the mechanics of the game pretty well, so let's move on to the levels of Star Fox 2. As I mentioned earlier, there are a variety of different encounter types that you will have to face if you want to save the Lylat system and make your way to Andross's base. They include planetary bases, large starships, missile attacks, fighter attacks, boss encounters, and Starwolf wing encounters. For planetary bases, you're probably going to want to use walker mode for the most part, because it can be a little tricky to navigate narrow corridors in flight mode without crashing. In order to enter a base, you first have to fulfill some sort of requirement, or in most cases, requirements. These include things like hitting switches and defeating mini-bosses. I really like these entry sections because they made you think outside of the box of a normal Star Fox game in a lot of situations. I remember one specifically where I had to push blocks into place in order to unlock the base. I didn't even know they had that kind of technology back in the SNES days, and it really took me by surprise. The insides of the bases, however, are pretty much all the same. Just defeat enemies to open doors until you reach the last room that has a core with some pylon-looking things that when destroyed will destroy the whole base. There might have been a switch room here and there, but I honestly only remember fighting enemies in the planetary base missions. When you do manage to destroy a base, it will no longer be able to launch missiles at Corneria, making your job just a little bit easier. Unfortunately, the large cruisers are pretty much the same as the base missions, just without the entry part, which makes them probably the most boring missions to do. Just beat enemies and destroy the core at the end. They're not unfun, just a little lackluster when compared to some other sections of the game, in my opinion. When you destroy a cruiser, the fighters that would be launched from it will no longer show up, similar to the missiles from the bases. The missile and fighter encounters are pretty straightforward, just destroy all your targets and that's it. However, if you're too slow, they will get away from you, making you have to track them down once again on the overworld map, which can be a little annoying, but the encounters are so fast, it's really not that bad. Depending on your difficulty, Andross will send bosses out from time to time for you to defeat. All the boss battles take place in space, and there are a few different varieties of bosses that Andross can send at you. The mechanics for all these bosses are pretty straightforward, but their attacks can be really hard to avoid while trying to fly a spaceship with an SNES controller. On the higher difficulty settings especially, use caution on these fights because you can take some serious damage before you know it. Next we have Starwolf, and this game made up of Leon, Pigma, Algie or Alki, and of course Wolf. I didn't know this until looking it up for this video, but Wolf's last name is actually O'Donnell. I just found that hilarious for some reason. Maybe he's related to Rosie. The Starwolf fights were the most fun in my opinion because they were pretty challenging and really made you feel like you were fighting in a space battle. They work very similarly to the boss fights in that you have to deplete the other pilot's health bar to 0 in order to win. This is where the barrel roll really came in handy because Starwolf will constantly be attacking you with their blasters, so you have to time your barrel roll right in order to not die. The bomb ability that Fox and Falco have also is a must for these fights in my opinion, because it takes out around half of their health bars, which can be really helpful on higher difficulties. There are a few ways to run into Starwolf. Sometimes they're waiting for you at planets, sometimes they come flying at you out of nowhere, and can even interrupt your other space battle encounters if they are close enough. I think that just about covers all the encounters you can face in Star Fox 2, except for one, the Andross fight, which honestly was a little disappointing. He has a few different attacks you can do, like shooting out a lot of beams or shooting out a lot of balls, but nothing really too interesting in my opinion. He also doesn't really move very much. He does teleport around the room from time to time, but once he teleports, he remains in one place until teleporting again. Just avoid his attacks and shoot him in his weak points until he turns into a cube, then shoot the cube until it explodes. Pretty straightforward final boss fight, but I guess it could have been worse. At least he has a different second form based on the difficulty you do, getting more and more monkey-like as you move up. A pretty short fight, but considering the nature of the game, it wasn't too bad. There are also some collectibles hidden throughout the levels of Star Fox 2 in the form of pepper coins. As the name implies, they are round coins that have General Pepper's face on them. If you collect them all, I believe the title screen changes slightly, but I haven't been able to collect them all just yet, so I can't confirm this. As for those of you that don't really care about collectibles, it's probably still a good idea to pick these up when you spot them, because they will fully heal you when collected. Next up, let's talk about the reason the game got cancelled back in 1995, the visuals. Star Fox 2 is for the most part made up of 3D graphics, with some 2D sprites thrown in here and there for things like characters and the overall map. I'll be blunt, the 3D is not great. In fact, it's really rudimentary and can even slow the game down at certain points. But this game was built for and runs on a 16-bit console. Isn't that amazing? I think it is. Most SNES games are completely 2D because that was the standard at the time and that was what they thought the system could handle. But Star Fox and Star Fox 2 showed that it was possible to do 3D on an SNES, and I think it worked out pretty well for the hardware they were dealing with. I definitely don't think it warranted scrapping a completed game. Imagine what the Star Fox series would be like today if this game actually released. Miyu and Faye might have become permanent members of the team. We might have even seen more games following a similar structure to Star Fox 2. Recent Star Fox games like Star Fox Zero are generally considered to be pretty bad, but if Star Fox 2 released, maybe that wouldn't be the case. Maybe we'll be playing completely different and exciting games, but we'll never know because Nintendo decided to cancel the game because the graphics weren't on par with newer consoles. I know I sound a little salty, and I am. I just don't understand the mindset of canceling a completed and honestly really fun game over something so trivial as comparatively worse graphics. That's something we wouldn't see from Nintendo nowadays, because I think they realize that the games they make are fun, and people really want to play them. But unless someone invents a working time machine, I guess there's nothing we can do about it now. I kinda got off track there a little bit, but let's get back to the visuals. The other aspect of Star Fox 2 is of course the 2D character sprites and overworld. And like other 2D SNES Nintendo games, they look great. In particular, the characters really look nice in my opinion. Even the two new girls, who never got brought back for some reason, have really fun and memorable designs. The Light system is super colorful, really making good use of the SNES's graphical capabilities. It must have taken such a long time to make the 2D look so good, while also building a ton of 3D models for the gameplay sections of the game, which really makes it hurt even more that Star Fox 2 was cancelled because of its graphics. Last but not least, we have the music, and I think Nintendo did a really good job capturing the theme of Star Fox in the soundtrack. It always sounds so grandiose and really drives home the fact that you're taking part in a space war. The music composition was done by Ishikawa Kozue and Kanki Yumiko. Both no longer work for Nintendo, but worked on some very well-known games during their time there. Ishikawa notably working on games like Link's Awakening and Earthbound. Kanki, of course, also worked on great games such as the original F-Zero and Tetris and Dr. Mario. So we can clearly see that these two women have great talent, and they definitely brought that talent in full force to the Star Fox 2 soundtrack. Every planet and encounter has its own unique theme that so perfectly goes along with the setting and what's going on, but still manages to stay distinctly Star Fox. It's just an all-around excellent soundtrack. I personally really enjoyed the title screen music and the Planet Fortuna theme, but honestly every song is great and worth listening to. If you want to hear a really good 90s video game soundtrack, look no further than Star Fox 2. Star Fox 2 at its core is a high-score and time-based game that was intended to be played again and again, each time having you try to do a little better than you did last time, a formula more popular in the days of mainstream arcades. Today we don't see many games like this, but that doesn't make them any less fun. I personally really enjoyed Star Fox 2 and can't wait to get back in and try to beat my high scores. If you like Star Fox or just good games in general, definitely give this one a shot. And if you enjoyed my review and want to make me super happy, give the video a like. I'll be doing more retro game reviews and unboxings going forward, so if you like that kind of video, consider subscribing, it really helps me out. As always, thanks for watching everybody, and I'll see you in the next one. Ack out. Wolf O'Donnell.